Evening, folks. Back again. Can't quite believe it. Episode number 17 already. It's yeah, remarkable where that time's gone. To be honest with you, but it's good. Audience is growing. I know this is quite a joyful time at week for a lot of you. It's for me as well. Really enjoy it, and yeah, let's hope to keep it going. So. First thing I just want to put is a bit of a sort of mix up in format because we are struggling getting people coming forward to join us on the Q&A live. Plenty of you guys asking questions and sending it in, but the part I really enjoy about this is the interaction and seeing where something can unfold when you're talking or working through a problem. To be honest with you, it adds an extra dimension. So as much as I'm happy to sit here rambling for an hour, it is nice to get people on. So all you camera shy folks out there who are hiding behind your keyboards, please get in touch. We'd love to get you on. It's really not all that scary. So it'd be great to do that. So with that in mind, bringing back, introducing some of the dealers in. And yeah, basically on a slight change of format with that one, to be honest with you. So I've got Chris from Elite Koi joining us this evening. And yeah, he's got a few questions from the group, the Elite Koi WhatsApp group, which has got a great community on there. And then, yeah, basically me and Chris between us are going to work through the questions. So if you sat there watching and you've got any questions, please start firing them into the comments and we'll pick them up, as well as working through some of the backlog we've got. And we'll see where that conversation between me and Chris takes us. So, yeah, British weather is playing havoc again at the moment, isn't it? I mean, what a weird day. It's currently absolutely glowing outside, looks fantastic, but it's been completely miserable and peeing it down all day. Yeah, which is crazy. My kids were out on we had a school trip out to Cleethorpes, bless them. And yeah, they've been burdened with that one. So there we go. That's what us Brits are getting used to, isn't it? Or we have to get used to. So yeah, and on top of that, Japan, it looks like the mud ponds have finally started clearing up. There's been a lot of fish releasing going on, starting with the Nisai this time of year more than anything, the bigger fish, because the water temperatures aren't quite there yet for the Tosai. So the Nisai have generally been kept much cooler, mainly Nigata I'm talking about here, but they've been kept much cooler and yeah, pretty much safe to release. So start getting a few videos of some of my collection to send out there and to get out there. Sorry, cracking shower at NND. I will share that one at some point, but that's a fish I've got really high hopes for the autumn, which is going to be moving into Sansai at that point. Fish I've had last year since Jumbo Tosai, so pretty exciting. And I'm not quite sure if Steve's got the video uploaded. I did just sort of drop it on him a little bit. Here we go. This absolute beast of a Sankey, that, believe it or not, is only 2 years old, and that is the winter body for that fish. So this is from Takano. He's a hobbyist breeder, believe it or not, but absolutely impeccable. All he breaks is Sankey, impeccable standard. The body on that thing is just savage. He makes males, females. The lineage produces that same sort of body. Regardless, to be honest with him, you can see the mud pond there that she's going to be living in for the summer, and probably not all that many fish in there, to be honest. But believe it or not, this is the first time I've actually seen that fish in a bowl. Takano is a really, really old dude. He's in his 70s. Great character. He just really loves what he does. Oh, excuse me, window guards fell down again. Really loves what he does, and yeah, but he's not too tech savvy. He's recently got on one of the Japanese apps called Line, which is like one of their social messaging apps, like WhatsApp and all the rest of it. And yeah, he sent me a random video of the pond Nisai, where he keeps his best Nisai, and I mean, it was complete. It's just incredible. And I was purring through. I thought, I've got to buy one of these. So I eventually found that one, but very quickly. It was just from a glance in the video. So played it. I was literally watching a 3-second snip of it swimming under another fish, is about as much as I could tell. But had the confidence, it looked good. An expensive purchase just to buy in that way. But yeah, confident. And yeah, having just seen it there, wow. And can't wait to see that one in autumn. I'm going to expect it to be 65 cm, but the body is going to be the bit that is really, it's mind blowing enough now. So imagine it with a a summer's growing season on the top of it. Just going to look absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, great fish. And the more I can get, I'll try and gather a bit of content up ready for next week. See if I can't share a few more of them in the mix as well. So yeah, let's not waste any more time. We'll get Chris in, fire through the questions he's got from the group, and then set about tonight's questions. And I am going to bring in a topic. Chris has recently spent some time with Jos Dirks, which you've probably seen. I know mentioned on here, and you've seen the stuff we did with Koi Talk with him. Chris actually went out to spend a week with him at his laboratory, working out there on clients, different cases, and all the rest of it. And yeah, a few bits there to share, and some of the interesting findings he's been having in relation to water testing for metals as well. So let's bring Chris in if we can. Steve, please. Evening, Chris.
Good evening, Ricky. You well?
How you doing? Yeah, I'm loving the podcast. I wonder where that inspiration come from. The frames on the wall.
Yeah, I had to get one. I love that podcast of yours. So yeah, it's. I've just been out about half an hour before we came on and had that done.
Nice one. Love it. So I think you've got a few questions from your group first, haven't you, before we get into some of the other stuff?
Yeah, we've got the first one that's coming regarding breeding koi, interestingly enough, which is one of our members has got big Chigoi. The Chigoi is female. He's concerned. He wants to get the eggs out of the fish, not for keeping eggs and bringing them on, but just purely for the female's health. So at the moment, his pond's at 18 degrees. He's got ropes in the pond. Asking, they're going for it, but they're just not getting over the line. So he's asking them any other tips that may help them succeed. He suggested playing some Marvin Gaye music might help and can do.
Brilliant. So I mean, my I've not got a lot of breeding experience, but what I have got is from the time out in Japan, working with the guys at NND, and I remember back then we had there's certain triggers that could work. So I remember it was a late spawning, and they had quite an old female that was being pretty stubborn. So all the things we were doing then, I mean, the initial setup is moving from the pond. What might work is to set like a temporary pool up, aerated temporary pool with fresh water, let it come up to temperature a little bit, set the spawning ropes in there and set the fish off there, which could be an initial trigger for them. Where he's at, I mean, he could try a bit of a temperature bump, just up a couple of degrees if that's possible to lift it, potentially one option. And another would be to potentially just sort of stimulate all the spring stuff, rain effect on top of water. That was one of the things I was doing with NND, setting up a sort of jet just to get some stimulation in there. But they're along the main routes of it, to be honest.
Yeah, when
possibly trying a different male if he's got one as well. If they're in an isolated environment, he's might have more of a chance of triggering it.
Yeah, I had a nice female achiever that had egged up once.
I remember it.
I found that keeping them in shallower water, so there's just enough water to cover them, certainly gets them going. But the one thing that I think I did struggle with a little bit with the achiever was I probably should have put 2 or 3 males in with her.
This is it. It's I just think probably mixing up, obviously where it's at is not working. So if that's what he wants to get over the line, probably look at more of a spawning type setup and having a go that way. It is important for the female's health to get them out. Even the amount of brushes, there might not be enough brushes in there. They're not easy things to come by, all these spawning ropes.
No. I'll just see if he comes on. Are you there? If you're there, Kev, have you got many brushes in the pond?
It should be. I think it's. Is it the Kev that keeps slagging me off for my photography work?
Well, his second question is: have we got any tips on best ways of photographing for photos?
So if he is watching, he's in trouble, Kev. He was in my good books at one point, but I'm gunning for him when I see him next. We'll have to one of your next events. We'll have to have a photo off, and see who wins.
That's a good idea. So the photo shows tips for them is a square blue bowl and patience, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, it's a tough one because obviously, koi photography. I mean, wow, you've got to have the patience of a saint. Normally, I see. Look, yes, 2 brushes. Might be worth a few more, Kev. To be honest with you, but I think I think possibly trying the spawning setup in a different area might work best. Just to try and get it triggered and off, and maybe a few more brushes in there as well. But yeah, coming back to the photography, it's really, really hard work, even for dealers. I mean, it's something we absolutely have to do in order to sell fish these days, because you've got to have them online and have a presence. And I've just saw it. See, my money's on Kev after. Here we go. It's another one chiming up. Satch, he's going to be in trouble as well. I'm not having it. Not having it. So it's clean bowl. So if you really want to do the job and do it well, it depends what you're doing. For the selling side of it, it's important they're done to a high standard. If you're just taking reference shots, it can be a lot easier. You just literally, bowl. The clearer you get the water, you see, when we're doing it, and obviously the method I've helped you guys with, clean water being prepared is an absolute must. Because even the slightest trace of organics in pond water, which you will do, if we're using it sort of flash photography based like we do, the camera picks it up and you really do lose some of the detail from the fish in there. So fresh water prepared, dechlorinated, all the rest of it, left to stand a while as well. Best idea, brought to temperature, blah, blah, blah. Best move. Now, again, it's depending where I'm a big advocate of using anaesthetic for this, and in a very low dosage. We're not talking full anaesthetic dose. This is just a small bit, just to calm the fish down and relieve the stress on both sides of the equation here. Stress for the fish and stress for us when it just stops them bolting around the bowl 100 miles an hour. So that really is the biggest secret to getting it done to some sort of level and getting them nice shots. Just making the fish a bit more placid and chilling everything out. And then from that, you're looking at your camera setup. Now, obviously, a lot of times you can be fighting glare and all the rest of it, which is tough. So if your camera, the ideal setup, if you're really into it, and this is for koi shops, you need a decent DSLR camera with a flash gun. That's an absolute must. I think you've probably found that was the biggest game changer for you, Chris, when you got that new camera. With a flash. You've got to have it. What the flash does then with some manual settings, which I'd happily share with anybody if they're wanting to go down that route. I've just seen Paul mention a polarizer. Don't use polarizers. It's all flash photography based. So the manual settings that I use, if you take a picture without the flash, it's just dark. There's not a lot there. So obviously when you turn the flash on, I'm fully in control of the light source from the flash. It eliminates all the glare in most settings you'll be in. Even when if you're doing it inside a greenhouse, something like that, you'll cut it all out and get a really nice shot. So then it's just about getting the positioning right and having the patience and waiting to get that right shot.
Yeah. I think for the photo shows and that, the biggest bit of advice, put the bowl, let the water settle and have a look see what's in the reflection. So if you're doing
obviously, if you're doing it without, this is a different game. So if you're going for phone pictures or no flash in particular, you are sort of fighting it a little bit. Polarizers don't they take the UV glare off the surface, but they won't stop reflections. That's something people really get wrong. So that's all good and well, but you won't stop the reflections coming through from different places. And I would share them with anybody else but you, Kev. Sorry, I forgot to mention that bit. So if you're doing it with the phone, the best thing is probably to try and get a big sort of cover, like a flattened down cardboard box or something like that. And you can get your phone or your other camera in then just to cut that glare off. But it's a tough one. It really is that the kit makes a big difference with that job.
Yeah.
It really does.
Patience is the biggest one.
Patience is the big one, isn't it? Driving up the wall after a good session.
It's like fish out the pond, isn't it? If it's not going your way, put the net down, go and have a cup of coffee and come back.
Pretty much, Chris. No fun. It's one I'm always happy to farm out that job.
Yeah.
It is. So is there any more from the group on question wise?
No, that's the 2 questions covered for now. I'll keep an eye and see if more come in while we're.
So before we get stuck into any more, then why don't you just tell everybody a little about your week with Yoss, some of the interesting points, some of the stuff you got up to, because I think this is all interesting stuff for folk.
Yeah, it's what a week,
what you
what a
thought
guy.
of him, seeing him in action as well.
Yeah, I mean, this guy's a true master of what he does. He's a qualified vet, which when you get to know him a little bit, you tend to forget that he's a virologist and bacteriologist, so he really knows his stuff.
Yeah.
He studied hard for his knowledge that he's got.
Yeah.
See him in action with his customers and the other koi dealers. He's just a normal guy like us. Really committed, no questions too tough for him. The lab weight was interesting, seeing how they do the PCR test. So when the PCR testing for CEV, which is sleeping sickness, flower and bacterium catering, they extract the DNA from the gill sample, which is quite a lengthy process. And then they match the strand of DNA from the other. Take 50 minutes, 5 minutes for a positive or negative test.
Wow.
And you know, when you're looking at some of the koi, some of the gill necrosis and that, you tend to jump to a decision on what they are before you've done the PCR test. And when you see it flick up negative, it's quite surprising. Now, the one thing that has become very apparent both in Holland and in the UK is that copper. Copper's quite high in a lot of ponds, and that's doing a lot of damage. So the long-term effect of copper. We've invested in some equipment to test for copper. So if anybody wants the pond water or the source water testing, we can do that at Lee Koi now. But fascinating week. It's well worth sending the samples over to Yoss if you're unclear or if you suspect there's a problem.
Did you come across any interesting cases while you were out with him?
The last client that we visited was a CEV and flavobacterium positive case. The two previous cases were that the only thing that came back was heavy metals, which was really, really high copper concentrations in them.
Yeah.
Well, it was interesting. One of the fish was a shizui, and we looked in one gill, and the gill looked healthy.
Yeah.
Flicked the fish over, looked in the other gill, and it was gone.
Yeah.
And I think the copper reading was something like 0.686 milligrams per litre. The over 0.006 that's become toxic. So massive, 1,000 times.
You see the reading, from my experience, all the reading, and you're talking about milligrams per litre. I can't remember the exact measurement when I was having it done at the lab, but their readings go down to, I'm sure it's UGL. I can't remember. I'll have to get that info, but it was even lower readings than that done at the laboratory. So when you're talking milligrams per litre already, it's crazy.
I think this is where part of the problem lies, because it's such a low level. Even when it's high, it's such a low level. We think it's insignificant. But then when you start looking at the long term, it could be caused. You know, and then when we look back at the trickle in, when we talked about the trickle in and that,
if you're
accumulating these levels in these small things, before you know it, you've got a big big level. So
I would say it's the long term effects with metals, I think, are the scariest as well, because it's the accumulation in the gills, all the rest of it. It's not just the short punchy hit you're going to get from something like, I don't know, an overdose of meds or chlorine exposure for a short while. This is just building up inside the body till all of a sudden you get that random fish death one day. You wonder what the hell's going on. And
I'm likening it to an alcoholic. So you might have an alcoholic that can have a good drink, but you can't see his liver.
Yeah.
You know, and it's. I think we're talking that kind of scenario.
Yeah, completely.
Really interesting stuff. The one thing that you may notice if your copper level's high and you're unaware is if you've got a fish with wounds that are stubborn to heal, that could be big one, big sign. And I tend to find strange feeding behaviour is one of the things that alerted me to a case some years back. You know, I had this fish behaviour in this client's pond that was
they acted, they swum, warm waters, they're swimming around actively, all the rest of it. You chuck the food on, you get the initial burst as if they know it's food, they're hungry, and they just weren't interested in consuming any kind of amount of food. And it was fascinating. And I just, as I watched it, thought this is something really not right here beyond what. And on top of that, a reoccurring bacterial infection that this guy had that he sort of got right, had a period, and boom, it kicked off again. And it was just relentless.
Yeah.
And that's what, my God, I mean, I think he was a zinc based problem more in his, but ridiculous, really was.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly something to be looking at. Interestingly enough, we've set up that channel with Yoss now where we can take gill samples and send them backwards and forwards for analysis. Cool. Unfortunately, the first case that we've done in the UK has come back positive for sleeping sickness.
I've seen that.
Which, but we've got it early, and I'm quite confident. I'm not going to say this to the guy, but I'm quite confident that we can maybe swing things around for him. Would be sensible. Them fish will have to stay in his pond now. They can't go anywhere else. We're quite happy with that. And if we can save them, then we've won, as far as I can see. But
good work.
Sometimes you as a koi keeper, you've got that niggling feeling in the background that something just isn't right, and you scrape. Water tests are good. So
very interesting. It's good stuff, and I just can't wait to get Yoss back in front of people. He's working on some content for us with Koi Talk as well. Hoping to get him tied down for a few features, and we've heard cracking reports on the fluke treatment dosing that he recommended. So more and more feedback I keep getting back of really, really positive results from that, with the full dose 50% day 2, 50% day 3. Which is great. I've been trialing it. I've tried it with praziquantel base just to sort of see, make sure there was no negative effects on the fish more than anything. So done it. I've actually done it. I've not managed to get a full case because I kept ballsing up with leaving hose pipes on and all the rest of it. But the early signs was there was absolutely no struggle, and that just sort of further indicates that first initial dose is just not really having the impact, is it?
Again, and it's the plastic media. The filters are good, and when you step back and take a look, I think we're starting to see the woods now, whereas before we couldn't see them from the trees. It's interesting. But on another note, if any, Yoss is going to be releasing his own fluke treatment very soon, so I think that's gone off to manufacture now. If there's any cases that our flukes aren't.
It'll be interesting.
Want to try.
Will be interesting. Right, let's. Have you been keeping an eye on it, Steve? You got some questions lined up for us there in the background. Right, your question. I moved my koi from outdoor pond to indoor pool, from average water to very soft water. I use buffer, and the fish seem okay, but my Dutch back has gone pale. Can it be rectified? Yes, it could be the stress of the move. So I've seen weird Sumi changes from stress-related problems in the past. Even just looking back, 1 year at the National, when it was at Newark, I had this stunning Nagami shower that I'd really finished Sumi all over it. I'd done it all the time we'd had it, and it went to the show and somehow got damaged in the vat. We think from one of the pumps they used to use to drain the water out, because it was a perfect sort of 2-inch round circular scales that got wiped off of it. And obviously that got very ulcerated, got bad, and one of the sort of problems of it ulcerating and getting ill like that, the Sumi just dropped off completely. So what you can tend to find is, as well, I don't know if you've moved it indoors, daylight changes might be affecting that a little bit as well. And sometimes the color of the tank, when you get some fish, when you put them in a blue bowl, the Sumi just fades out of them. And you can see that even if you've got a pond that's got like a blue or different color background to it, sometimes that can happen. So I would guess likely is when things probably settle down a bit more. I wouldn't relate this to water hardness, to be honest. I just probably think when things settle down, you can possibly expect the Sumi to come back there. But I mean, we've all seen that, haven't we, Chris, when the fish have been in a bowl and it just kinky up sore, an absolute nightmare for it.
And churros, when you've got a churro at the show, that just turn out great. I've got one question there, and
Yeah.
that's why is the difference between the hardness? Is it the same source water feeding the outdoor pond and the indoor pond? Because why the difference in hardness?
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll have to I'll see if we can get some feedback on that one. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't think the hard soft thing related to Sumi, I think people really need to get out of their head. I think it's more the question of the conversations we're having about what's actually in that water, the makeup of the water from a sort of like a metals and minerals basis and all the rest of it that has more of an impact. Because I'll keep saying it, I've seen fish kept, in soft water where, Sumi is a massive problem in that it just keeps coming. Shisui is being that prime candidate, If this theory worked out, every time you put Shisui in soft water, there'd never be a problem. Yet I've got a client with soft water who can't keep a Shisui or an Ayawakaba in there without them absolutely going to absolute shit after no period at all. Yeah, I keep them, firsthand from some ones you've seen at my, keep them absolutely superb. My water's not, not particularly soft, so I really think it's more the wake up. Yeah, you do pretty well with them as well, Chris, don't you?
Yeah.
So
the other one with Sumi is temperature. If he's gone from outdoor pond into indoor pond, it may be a little bit warmer, and Sumi can soften off a little bit as it gets warmer.
It's getting onto the time of year here now where I normally start holding my head in my hands because I'll normally have a nice pond of Shiro or something kicking around that's just going to turn white with another few degrees.
Yeah,
drives me bonkers. But yeah, temperature plays a huge part, as you say. So, how does one bring out Sumi? Interesting. One of the hardest parts of this, and I think it's the one everyone struggles with the most, is patience. That's one in koi keeping that really seems to go amiss. But we're talking about different types of Sumi performing in different ways and reacting differently in different water as well. But you'll see like Dainichi, for instance, the Dainichi Sumi, and again, Chris has seen some of the fish transform up at my place. That Sumi, there's sort of two types, but one more solid where you see it sat under the skin like a Kage looking effect. And this stuff can really take a long time to really hit its peak because what's happening is this is sat really deep in the skin. That sort of Sumi where you got that grey effect, and slowly over time it comes up like it layers, it gets thicker. You'll often see on a show where the Sumi's sat on Shiroji with those fish in particular, it'll lag behind where Sumi's overlaid with Benny a little bit, because what happens is the Benny actually sits underneath it and pushes the Sumi up a bit faster. Whereas with on the Shiroji, that's not happening. So it takes time, and what happens is over this time, it layers up, it gets thicker till it eventually gets to the top of the skin, and you get that inky black Sumi form. And no matter what you do, there could be water that would work against it and slow it down, and also speed it up. But that Dainichi Sumi like that is going to take 3, 4, possibly even 5 years to really start getting to its absolute peak. And no matter what you do, you're not really going to force that scenario. There's others. There's another type of Sumi where you might often see it. You see it in Showa and you can see it in some Sanki where the Sumi actually, and Shiro Sori actually, the Sumi actually sits in the top of the skin. And it comes through. Sometimes you can't even see it coming, but sometimes you'll get like a few black shimmies, few black dots forming on the top, and then slowly you get more and more form until they form a cluster and a clump, and that becomes a block of Sumi. And what happens with that Sumi tends to start there and work its way down a little bit, but it's much more reactive, that sort of Sumi. So what you can tend to find is you can manipulate that with water a lot more. It's a lot more affected by temperature as well. You can have a fish like that looking absolutely superb over winter, crank it up to 24, 25 degrees and find that it vanishes or it fades off 50%. It's an absolute nightmare, but it can come back equally as quick, and it's truly fascinating to watch it. And that's where over the years, Umo Showa were particularly common with that trait, the original lineage back in the day when it was an independent farm. And it's one of the things people loved about him, to be honest with you, because he had this super radical Sumi transformation. And I've had it in some of the Dainichi fish at my place, only 1 or 2 from Dainichi Toyota mainly, so slightly different parent set. But yeah, it's not actually that easy to manipulate it. But if you are looking to progress it, the best thing you can do, and this is what I'm finding, people always used to say cooler water. You've probably heard that, Chris, as well. I actually tend to find when water gets too cold, it actually stops the Sumi progression. And likewise, when it gets too hot, you can knock Sumi progression back as well. But a real key core temperature, if you want the best chance of getting every colour to its peak, so like conditioning for a show, 18 degrees is absolutely magical. It's a great temperature for controlling the body well, but getting everything at its best. You're probably going to do sustained period at that temperature. Always tends to work wonders for me with Sumi, rather than being too cold or too hot, to be honest. So
the Sumi factory.
You what, Chris?
You call it the Sumi factory, don't you? When you get them to 18 degrees, you see just coming down.
Yeah, it does. It absolutely flies in most cases. But you've got to remember, this is not. It seems such a simple question as Sumi. These things are always multi-layered and very complex, and there's a lot of variables to it all. But hopefully, like I said, the biggest thing with Sumi is patience, and some of it never comes. This is one thing I learned with Kaneko shear up sorry, to be honest. My God, them things were the eternal tatigoi, I think is the word they use. So, you'd have the Sumi sat down, all sat there staring in the face, and you'd buy it on this prayer that Sumi's going to come, that's going to be absolutely fantastic. And then you wait 2 years, you wait 3 years, 4 years, and this Sumi never comes. And I've really found that became a real consistent trait with Kaneko Shiros, to the point where the only way you could truly buy them was with the Sumi pattern all there and finished, and it would stay there, and the fish would just grow with it. So there's loads of quirks. Omasako, you move into Shiro roams with Omasako. And I'll be completely honest, it's still a lineage I've not truly got my head around. I've not had enough hands-on experience with it, and it's an absolute minefield. I'm not even sure that the guys there truly know what's going to happen with some of that Sumi sometimes, because I've heard, stories of mature fish going out to mud pond looking all finished fantastic, being pulled out 6 months later with no Sumi on them. And it's just like nothing you was ever considering that. And then you've seen the serious transformations where they've had tosai with nothing on to be in an absolute worldie 3 to 4 years later. But it's fascinating. Sumi is fascinating. I think it's one that makes the varieties like Showa and Shiro so interesting for people.
I remember the NND before the DK lineage, and then the Sumi would just appear from nowhere. I couldn't see that.
They were wild, weren't they?
Yeah, unbelievable. And
that
not
was
just
that sort of Sumi I mentioned. Top of the skin, it come like little blebs all of a sudden, didn't it? And then before you know it, bang, there's a full pattern there.
The other one with Sumi is as well, it depends on the variety. If you've got Kumunru or Kiko, the Sumi, where it's really thick, it may be laid on the red, but it can fade out as part of that variety.
Kikos and Kumunru, I mean, my God. I don't even know where to start with them things. They're great varieties, but my God, they keep you on your toes. Get you questioning your sanity at times.
I did get a question off someone, and he said, "What's the difference between a Kumunru, a Benny Kumunru, and a Showa?" Which we know what it is, but I'm not sure I'd begin to explain the difference.
Yeah, I've seen the breeding, but the Benny type is a different sort of hue generally across them. But it's the way the Sumi is formed on the body, completely different, different. But all fascinating varieties, fascinating stuff. But yes, there we go. Sumi, to end that one, the biggest thing with that is patience, and that's a very difficult one to teach, unfortunately. But there we go. What else have we got then, Steve? Can you give an insight into koi bought from breeders but left in the country for further development while the costs involved? All right, okay. That looks like one more for me again, Chris. But this is something you've dipping your toe into, really, isn't it, this year? By the way,
we've got two. Put away now. One azakari at Akawa, a Shuo.
That's an exciting one.
Yeah, and of course the small 12 centimetre DK lineage.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. While just have you got the picture of it on your phone? Because I'm sure people love that. While I sort of blab on about this, just see if you can pull the picture up to sort of show on the screen. So anyway, insight into koi bought from breeders but left in the country for further development. So yeah, this process is called azakari, which basically is a Japanese word which means to take care of, where the fish is left with the breeder. I have touched upon this a few times, but yeah, insight into it. It's a fascinating process, and one it's basically it's almost like buying a dream, the whole thing. And the dream scenario, when it really works out, is absolutely superb, but it is absolutely stooped with risk, because breeders farms, this is where, you know, not all breeders are great at raising koi for a start, which is something to really bear in mind. Mud ponds are very volatile environments. You know, I've been through cases where I lost a lot of fish at one breeder because the pond got polluted because a bear knocked a feeder in. And well, you think feeder, the small things. No, this is one of the big industrial ones that you can fit several people inside. So bears knocked the feeder into the pond, which has obviously caused a massive pollution in there, and then just basically stripped the oxygen out and destroyed a load of koi. So it's all these kind of things that we're not generally thinking about. But yeah, for the past couple of years now, bears roaming the mountains have been a huge thing, attacking feeders and all the rest of it, trying to get to the food. There's just masses and masses of predators. So depending upon the breeder, which is a really important part of it, you know, some go to extreme lengths to make sure none of this happens, but even then, it still can, and it's all being guided by a lot of guesswork, which relies on their experience in doing it. There are some breeders and more breeders now where the fish are getting raised indoors, but tends to be a pricier process, to be honest with you, and the results can often not be as good because some of the systems, you know, they just end up with too many fish in sometimes and be a bit mixed. You've got to remember these farms are just run by, you know, one and two people sometimes. So during this time of year, they're trying to do their absolute best to raise the koi as well they can, but got all the breeding and everything else going on, all the selection work. It's a vast amount. So yeah, all said and done, in a lot of cases, I think it's knowing whether it's right or wrong to do it. There's nice little, you know, some breeders where you're getting nice little deals. There's actually something I'm working on with NND at the minute, because I bought a nice collection of smallish toe side that we're hoping to release as a project through our dealers to get a quite affordable, just a basic, a nice mud pond experience where the price of the fish isn't too crazy. All the costs are associated in, and it's sort of low risk for everybody. But when you sort of move up the ranks into, you know, 2-year, 3-year fish, you've really got to look and think, you know, can I really not do a better job at home? Which, if you buy in high level fish, to be honest with you, and that's what this process is really meant for a lot of the time. If you're buying a high level fish, I would question if you're not, you know, confident enough to raise it well in your own, should you even really be buying that fish in the first place, to be honest. And yeah, when I look at raising, you know, more and more so what I'm doing at my facility, it really makes me question, you know, is the mud pond right? And as I've gone through my collection of fish this year, it really is a case of, you know, bring that back, because I think I'll do a better job than that breeder. Or in some cases, I mentioned NND, some of the best fish I ever sat with them guys because I trust them absolutely explicitly. So if we can just leave that question on the screen, I can bring Chris in, he'll show us.
Yeah, I've messaged it to Steve, so hopefully I don't think it's.
Oh yeah, that's not coming through. Have you got the Akawa one? That's more the one I was on about.
The no, no. I think I've got your Akawa one. Do you recognise that one?
That's it. That is your one.
Sorry, yeah, that's the one.
Just send it to Steve. He can get it up on the screen then in a minute. So yeah, coming into it. So if it does die, again, this depends on the setup you have with the breeder. So a lot of the time, first year, I'll have a life guarantee. But if the fish absolutely goes to rubbish, but it comes out alive, most breeders won't compensate in that instance. So you've got to bear that in mind. Yeah, I'm just, to be honest with you, it's a process I love, but it is fraught with risk, and the cost as well. So coming back to it, from when I sort of started in Japan, you know, most breeders would charge, you know, a couple hundred, maybe 250 quid to keep a fish for the summer. Because the process has become such a big part of the industry now, costs are absolutely soaring. So, you know, a 2 year to 3 year fish, you might be paying 350 to 400 pounds just for the summer growing season, and then an additional fee for the winter season as well. So when you factor that in, you know, that is buying a half decent fish for somebody, or heavily contributing towards the running cost of an entire pond for the season and the food bill, which is how I'm looking at it. You're just doing that for one fish that you're then not in control of. So a lot to stack up. Like I say, it's a great process, but it's finding what's right. And I think if it's something you sort of feel you want to do for the experience, look for things that are low risk. You know, so there's some Taniguchi events you see every now and again where the fish can be raised from winter to spring in his indoor ponds for a really low fee. You can get some great fish there and some really good results. Like I say, maybe things like what I'm hoping to get locked up and done with NND will be nice. But when it gets into the more valuable stuff, I would be saying you want to be looking more at your own environment, building your own skills in order to raise those fish more successfully back home, which has gone off the topic of the question a bit. I think I've answered the question, but then also my opinion on that process as a whole, because yeah, if it's second year fish that's already been there a year and you choose to leave it, that is generally at your risk. And when that goes wrong, a breeder will walk away from it. It really is. And can you afford to just walk away from that yourself and be at ease with it? And what I tend to find is that with a lot of people, when they're in Japan and they say, yeah, that's no problem, when the shit actually does hit the fan, it becomes a different story. And then it can really lead to just a breakdown in relationships as well. So, yeah, lot to consider with that one overall. But
yeah, this is the first time I've ever dipped my toe in.
Yeah, here we go. So that's Chris's NND Shiro, which has been at the it was at the All Japan earlier this year. Great fish, really great little fish.
It came third, didn't it, in its size? And
yeah,
it did really well.
Did
so
well.
That one,
and then the Akawa one. Here we go. What a fish that is. So this has been in. I think it was the Kyushu show. This one's been in and had a go. A male fish. I mean, just look at it. This is again comes into another conversation. You're never going to turn that down. You know that fish is going to excel, male or female. You look at that bone structure. That fish is going to excel, and I think that'll be an exciting one come harvest.
I'm so excited about that one. I can't.
Yeah.
But you know, the decision. I'm going to have to be guided on you. The decision when it comes home and if it stays. And
yeah, absolutely. I seem to think that'll be. My opinion, it'll be primed well, possibly to compete at that Kyushu show again next year. And Akawa does a great job of raising fish. So yeah, exciting times with that one.
Yeah, looking forward
for sure. It is. What else have we got, Steve? I can't believe 14 minutes has passed already. Lee, here we go. Is it possible for one fish to get a bacterial issue in the pond when all the others are fine? Go on, I'm going to let you go with that one first, Chris.
Yes and no. If a fish is weak, it's going to be systemically ill and it's going to show the signs of a bacterial illness. So the reddening of the belly, the emaciation, these are like clinical signs that the fish is very, very poorly. And they look like bacterial issues. I think a bacterial issue in the pond, I would expect to see more than 3 or 4 fish suffering the same symptoms.
Yeah.
I think that's.
I think we can't forget as well. They can literally just get mechanical damage.
Yeah.
I'm actually having this problem at the minute in one pond where I've got all my. You've seen the Karashigoi and the Asagis that I've had to completely load up with fish because of space. I've just been holding it. I think it's one I shared on Facebook. The feeding frenzy. You know, there's over 500 fish in that pond, and you chuck the food on, and they are just pummeling into the sides of the pond. Stacking 2 or 3 fish high. It's brutal to the point where I've had to turn the auto feeder off because I've got a massive split fins that I'm having to deal with, or will have to deal with later. And there's just a few fish that started appearing with little clumps of raised scales, and I knew straight away it wasn't anything more sinister than that's just genuine mechanical damage from piling into the side of that pond. So it's a case of determining it's not a wider problem, isn't it?
Just going back to the bacterial issues, if you're concerned about bacteria in the pond, you can have a microbiological analysis done of the pond water. So we need 100 mils of pond water. We can send that over to the lab, and that will come back with a count of the bacteria. And it also, I mean, these bacteria aren't foreign; they're all part of the pond. It's just
it's the levels and the balance of it.
But the machines that Jos and Emily have got there can count the individual cultures of bacteria and advise whether or not you're looking at more gram-negative one as opposed to a positive one.
Yeah.
But that, to be fair, with any bacterial issue, the only way to really deal with it is to analyse it and see and find out exactly what it is.
This is it, and I think that's probably the point I'd stress. Knowing that services like this are going to become more readily available, just like getting your water tested, your nitrite, your ammonia. If there's any shadow of a doubt you're concerned about, get it screened, because there's just no time for delaying with a true bacterial problem. So one fish I'd question, it could just be something mechanical caused. I knew in the instance I described it was just along them lines and wasn't concerned. I did just do a routine scrape because flukes can sometimes cause a few patches and stuff like that, but it wasn't that, and I knew it was just mechanical damage. But absolutely, if there's anybody watching this, if you suspect that sort of problem, start some analysis work as quickly as possible, and you will save yourself a lot of hassle.
Yeah.
Cool. So I've just seen this one buried in the comments. Actually, my wife, my hair needs cutting, and more available styles. Absolutely. Fascinating story here. My wife is my hairdresser. That's where we sort of first met, to be honest with you. And we've got a lovely salon that she runs. But can I ever get an appointment? It's an absolute joke. So there we go, watching that. She'll give me a good hiding when I get back as well, no doubt. Brilliant. Right, what else we got lined up, Steve? I'm new to koi keeping. My pond is less than a year old. I feel like I'm always fighting losing battle with parasites. In your early days, did you ever feel like giving up? Oh my God. That was a very reassuring yes from both sides.
You need that maturity. The first year can be like absolute hell, but realistically, you need that years with the maturity in the filter to establish the pond and build the ecosystem, if you like, your own unique ecosystem. Sometimes as well with the parasites, if you're constantly treating for them, if it's trick and flukes, it's not one of the more dangerous parasites. Try and work on the fish's immune system. So build it by using clays, good quality food. Takazuma do a food called Yugen, which is an immune boost food. Now, what we found is where we've adapted that routine in ponds last year, there's very, very little problem showing early this season. So not only have the new ponds got that maturity, but we're also proactively working on that immune system so that the fish can fight their own battles. Parasites will always prey on the weak and vulnerable, and we can prove that because you can scrape one fish and you can see them. You can scrape another fish and you won't see any. So the parasites are attaching themselves to them. They're preying on the weak fish. Try and give them a little bit of a break and really actively work on increasing the good conditions and the immune system in the koi.
Completely good advice, Chris. For me, this is, the early years are always tough because ultimately, really, you don't know what you're doing. This is the big, big part, and my God, it's stressful. And all I want to say is right here, I'm not sure that question's from, but you're not alone. The hell and back that me and my dad went through in the early years, his early years, and then our early years together when we set all the new fish houses up. And, every time we try something new, you start importing fish directly yourself, and you get a whole host of new problems. The first time, even with experience, the first time we encountered sleeping sickness many years ago, if it hadn't have been then for the experience of Fujo I had on the end of the phone at that time, we'd have lost a pond full of fish. Because we had these, I remember in Sakazumi Goromo, they were absolutely great. Then all of a sudden, before we know it, nearly every fish just laying on the top doing absolutely nothing, and we're scraping, there's nothing. And it's stressful unless you've got the people to turn to and the resources around to sort of calm things down. But when you don't know, I think and this is something in my koi keeping journey I found, less is more. It really, really is. And that's where my keep it simple mantra, banging on comes from, because I remember over the time, you get a lot going on all the time. You don't know which problem to pick first, and you can end up doing too much, creating more problems because you don't give one thing enough time to play out. And I'm not going to lie, it's probably took me 15 years, maybe a bit more, throughout all this to get to the point where now I really do just take a step back and slowly broach it, and bit by bit, address and tackle it. And you have to, because I've seen it, on the run up to having events at the shop when we had it. I remember when this pond, obviously you want everything to be perfect, and we moved all these new fish in, got them settled. 3-4 days before the event, they started flashing like I've never seen in my life. They were bouncing off of everything. Nothing on scrapes, absolutely nothing. It's just like, what do we do? Because the last thing you want is customers seeing fish bouncing, because the first thing they're going to suspect is they're covered in parasites or there's something like that, which wasn't the case. And we start doing stuff, tinkering, and before we know it, we're doing something and it's getting worse. And oh my God, ultimately all they needed was time, in truth, just to settle down. So I think I've mentioned, over medicating can be a problem here. If you've got a lot of parasites, the constant medication, because medication can lead to imbalance and upset in your system. Yeah. And then you're just constantly working against it all the time, which is in truth sometimes where that step back in for me instance would be probably raise the temperature up a bit, get some salt in there just to take some pressure off the fish, off the immune system, and let that sort of kick in a little bit. But yeah, you're not alone. Some of the honest stories I won't share, but all of my learning has come from hands-on experience that at times has also cost thousands and thousands of pounds. But you come out of the other, you stick with it and you come out the other end stronger, because there's no better way of learning.
I think also here as well, you've got to be really careful where you take the advice from, Ricky.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And if fish flash and flick, my dog scratches, he hasn't got fleas. And it's just the nitrate. If people's fishes are flashing, check the nitrate. It takes a very small amount of nitrate to set the fish flashing. And I think we really do have to think long and hard about the meds that we're using and the quantities that we use.
Completely.
It can't be good for the organs.
No, this is it. It's stuff, and flashing can be playing out for so many different reasons when it is that, and doing more sometimes just creates more issues and more need to flash. So
it's like a cycle. Yeah. You get locked in and you just can't break out of it. It just goes round and round and round.
No. And I think this is where, for me, I always the importance of you guys, the dealers and the good ones, doing a good job for people is to help, especially people newer into the hobby, through this journey, through these stressful times. And I know from my past, we do end up burdening a lot of the stress as well, because you really do take it. I used to anyway, really take it on board, wanting to help these people get through the other end of it and stay in the hobby.
Yeah.
And it's crucial, but this is when you've got that relationship with somebody, it's that support network to help you through these tough times, as opposed to not getting the advice, or getting advice that's probably creating a problem, because some advice from some people is purely motivated by cash and sales, which if you get stuck in that cycle, it's going to be a mess. But yeah, hang in there. But again, just think that I know, but all the things you can do, like I say, if you are struggling a lot, some background salt can be an absolute god lifesaver at times, because it can just take some pressure off, ease some stress in the fish a little bit, and allow them to recover from busy periods of medication and stuff like that. So there we are with that one. What salt would you start? 0.1 is not worth introducing. You want to be 0.3 is a great sort of background solution. Raising up higher if you need to in serious cases, which wouldn't be too many. Not from what we're discussing here, but sort of like 0.3, 0.4% is a decent background level. But make sure as well when you're using salt, you buy a proper salt tester and you're not just gauging it, because salt levels that are up and down and inconsistent and all the rest are pretty much as much use as having none in there at all. And
if you're going to salt your pond, you want to be thinking about having your water analysed first to find out what the issues are, you know, and then working through them.
Just it's all of it, isn't it? All of it. And to be honest, a lot of that, coming back to a lot of that lab work on the water, I'm not sure the costs involved, but if it's just well worth having done anyway. Like your test, buying your standard test kit and looking at your nitrite, your pH, your ammonias, it's definitely worth knowing what's going on a deeper level with your water as well.
Yeah,
hands down. Right, what else have we got, Steve? Right, so how can you tell the difference? Well, obviously the proper way, the true way of sexing a fish is to actually have it out. Easy way is to check the fin, which you can say you can feel. Oibosh is the technical term. The little dots you get on the front ray of the fin with male fish, you can sometimes get them around the gill area as well. But the thing with oibosh is sometimes it's actually looking for it, because it can be so small at times. Feeling it is no good. You have to look, and it can be a serious strain. So that's one part. And then we want to, and this is in younger koi, especially sort of like Nisai more than anything, because Tosai are notoriously difficult to sex, and that's why you will find most sold as unsexed in the market, because I think your issue here is you're finding unsexed in the sort of society we often live in. The minute the dealer commits and goes female and they find out it's not female, you're opening yourself up to someone coming back at you for it. So it's just far easier to get them listed unsexed. That's a very harsh reality of that. But when people are committing, or if you're wanting to check, you check the fin. If you can see the little dimples across the front ray, you know you're heading towards male. Flip the koi over. The vent shape is one you'll get. So when you're looking at the fish, obviously down the length of the fish there, the male vent tends to be more of a slit running in line with the body, whereas the female will get the sort of horizontal line that can eventually get a bit of a bump over it as well. Body shape, and then obviously you can squeeze down there and try and extract any sperm out the males as well. So it's basically just sort of ticking the boxes as you go along. Check the fin, check the vent. The body can sometimes be an indicator, and fin shape can be an indicator, but I'm not going to recommend you trying to gauge that one. Mature females you can often see because they get a bit eggier underneath, but I'm not going to recommend trying to gauge it on shape because of how fine them lines are getting. You'd probably see it, Chris, and you with a Mr. Showers. Just from looking, you can't tell male, female, anything apart.
No, certainly some of them. Well, interestingly enough, on the question of sexing them, last year we had a guy in the shop who wanted one of the flashy. I remember the big trashy guy, and he wanted me to sex it, and he was having this fish, and I rolled it over in the bowl and I bruised its back, and then that guy didn't buy that fish. And I thought, you know, I put through that fish for no reason whatsoever. So
it's one of these lines, isn't it? But I've seen it more. Obviously, there was a big phase of guaranteed female tosai in Japan some years back, and I've really seen this. Danichi's been the biggest one this year. Danichi now, throughout the physical auctions when they were in play, had a lot of guaranteed female stuff. It's one of the auctions I was sat in, and that guaranteed female, the price of them stuff was going ridiculous. Now, I've seen it's getting to the time now where they can sex the tosai with a little bit more certainty, but they're not being sold as guaranteed anymore. It's being sold as female, no guarantee, or female as of this date, no guarantee is the wording, and there really is. Now, I bought 2 of them fish. The Tancho I bought last year more than anything at Dainichi is one of them, female at the time. Turned out male.
Yeah,
absolutely no comeback at the time. I wasn't valuing it based on, to be honest, the fact I went that little extra step on the hope it would turn out female. But yeah, it's a tough old game, and even at the male end of it, all the Nisai Dainichi I've got, which I'm due to hopefully get through next year. The last time I had some of them out trying to get some accurate answers, they were driving me up the wall. Because I truly just trying to tell them from bodies so difficult. And then I was getting ones where the oiboshi on the fin sort of was showing a little bit, and then the vent was sort of telling me the other way, and then working in reverse. And it's a tough old game. So this is probably why you find dealers very, very reluctant to commit either way, because ultimately, you know, you're moving into the territory of trading standards and all the rest of it, where ultimately you might end up being sold something that doesn't turn out to be what it is. And frankly, it's not worth the hassle, Chris, is it?
No. And it's not worth putting the fish through the stress of
and that
through the sex and everything else. It shouldn't really matter. If the only way that you can really tell is if a fish is female is to watch it spawn. You know.
Yeah, well, I disagree with that to some extent, but it is a game. And when you see the breeders trying to get the toe size sexed, that is a military operation. I've seen it at Momotaro where the fish are passed around 3 people before they actually commit on an answer.
Yeah.
So it's literally the fish anaesthetized, passed down a chain of very experienced people, check before they get to the point of giving it female guarantee. So yeah, it's a tough one. But to be honest, I'm more happy to see the things up as unsexed, because I think it helps. I do want to see this line abolished and people just focusing on the fish in front and not the gender.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's a big one. We're flying here. Gobbled up an hour already, Chris.
I know.
So we'll probably just fire through a couple more, and then I'll go home and get my tea because I'm starving. I have a Mizuoga 47 cm. When it has to be bold for, say, a scrape, I see small amounts of blood coming from the gills. Does happen on large koi? Is it by stress? Yeah, obviously the blood vessels and everything change when you're going after catching, stressing, bringing the fish up to the surface, and it can come to the point where it just ends up erupting out of the gill. So it can be quite normal. Don't panic too much. Best thing, to be fair, just get it back in pond and leave it be. Let it recover from it, without a doubt. Any more to add to that, Chris?
If a koi is particularly tricky to scrape, opt for an easier one. Go for an easier fish. Yeah. Go for a smaller one that's easy to handle.
Yeah. That's always an interest. Now you've said that, actually, that's just prompted me about when people are picking the fish to scrape, because I think it's always a common thing. If you're doing the scrape or you're trying to diagnose a problem, I think just logic instantly says go for the fish that looks the illest.
Yeah.
And now, from the fact, what you can actually tend to find, if it's a fish that's exceptionally ill, the parasites might have already been done with it and moved on to something else. Yeah. So I've done that in the past. You go straight to that one there. That's what I'm going to check. You find it, you don't find anything. You go after a generally healthy-looking one, then you find the problem, because they become the new host, the new food source for them parasites. So yeah, just in case you are always heading down that route, if you are in a point of doing scrapes, for me personally, I think it's important you take 2 or 3 fish and get a decent sample and diagnose it that way.
Have you ever used to date, Ricky, for doing the scrapes? I got asked this question a couple of weeks ago, and I thought,
yeah,
if it was a big fish and you were struggling, then I would.
I'd recommend it to anybody who's not confident in handling fish.
Yeah.
Just plain and simple, because you get that wrong with that slide, you can quite easily end up knocking a few scales out that you might not want to do. Because let's face it, you could have some really valuable little toesai in there that you need to scrape that you don't want to do that damage to. So yeah, absolutely. And to be fair, the last lad we had working on site when I was training him up with a smaller fish, to be fair, for speed, I was just teaching him to do it by hand. But the minute it came to anything bigger and more valuable, because I know he didn't have the handling skills, anesthetize it every time we had out. Because again, we're just talking about reducing stress. What's the point in having a fish there? You're absolutely fighting to get it flipped over to get the scrape, or damaging it, when you can just get it anesthetized, get the job done, and yeah, everyone's far less stressed at the end of it.
Yeah, good point.
So yeah, that's a good one, that, Chris. Right, last one then, Steve. Let's see what we've got. Is there a particular name for a Sanki that's predominantly red over most of the body with white and a Sumi spot? Yes, there is. I presume we mean Akasanki. That's really, and literally his translation of that is red Sanki. If I presume if I've got that bit right. So predominantly red over the body, most of the body with white and a Sumi spot. So obviously we're expecting predominantly red Sanki. So we're talking pretty much almost nothing showing other than probably a bit of red in the belly region, a bit of white in the belly region, something like that is Aka Sanki. Quite rare beasts, to be honest with you. And you're moving more into the territory there, becoming Akabeko. That's going to tread a very, very fine line there, to be honest with you. But typically, just generally, you'd just call it Sanki still. But you're going to be in that territory of it just being Sanki or possibly Akabeko. Fine line. If it is an Akabeko, happy days, because they are like rocking horse shit to get hold of. So embrace it if you have.
I think the last time I asked you for one, you said that they didn't exist.
I think that's a lot easier to answer with that one, yeah, for definitely. Sure. Awesome. Thoroughly enjoyed that tonight, Chris. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, enjoyed it.
So I hope everybody else has enjoyed that one. So we'll keep this format rolling unless obviously there's all these shy members everywhere in Chris's group and all around. It would be great to get you guys on just to get that diversity in the conversation and cover as many topics as we can. But if not, please drop questions in wherever we can. I think we're doing our best to keep them, or Steve's doing a great job of keeping in one area so we can work through them and steer the discussion that way. But other than that, I'm off to get some food because I'm starving, and I'll see you lot next week.